Welcome to Leon Software Ops tutorial. Today we will cover schedule, which is the main part of the system where we plan and prepare flights. I've already added some activities to our flights list, and we'll be looking at how to add and edit those in 3 different views. The main aim of the tutorial is to show you how to move smoothly around schedule and to see the different things that can be done in here. So we've got 3 main views: table, calendar and timeline. Each of the views serves different purpose and you are free to use whichever you find the most comfortable. Each one also consists of 3 panels. So we've got the left panel, which is the filter, the right panel, which is the ops center where we prepare the flights, and the bottom panel where we can add and edit new trips. So let's start with the table view, which is a basic flight list, if you will, which will display only flights and positionings. Okay, let's pin that to the side. Okay, so in the left panel, we determine what we want to see on the screen. In the tab schedule, we can filter out flights or positionings. We can group the schedule in 2 different ways. So by day and registration or day and the trip, we can filter the flight type. So if we only want to display flights that are packs or training or cargo, we can filter that in here. Commercial type, flight status, so confirmed is an actual flight that's confirmed and is going to happen basically. Option is a possible flight that we don't know if it's going to happen yet, and opportunity is mainly for sales purposes, which means there's a window of opportunity where selling a flight would be possible, but we don't know exactly yet what kind of flight that would be. And in the section show, we have ferry, cancel flight, journey log or flight watch, which means basically if you want to see ferry flights, cancelled legs, flights that have the journey logs filled in, which means they're basically terminated, and flights which have the flight watch filled in. Okay, in the tab aircraft, we simply can select the aircraft we want to see, and the tab more is type of a search engine where we can filter flights by different factors like flight number, trip number, airport client and so on. We also have this section here, which is a further filtering tool, which allows us to set the view to exactly what we need to see and remove the parts that we don't really need. So in the section columns, we can select which columns we want to see and which we do not want to see. Obviously the columns like airports and times are by default, but we can have additional ones like, for example, a trip number, or we want to see if the quotation has been added to the particular flight without actually going into this particular flight. So we can click apply and we have the columns now showing. Yeah. Okay, the colors, we can determine how we wanted the colors displayed. This is a place for disclaimer. We have a set scheme of colors in the system in regards to type of flights and type of different activities. The only thing that can be manipulated by the user is the color of the aircraft, which is this bit here. So that can be set in the fleet settings. These colors stay the same. I will go through the difference between them as we go along with the tutorial. Okay, so the flight type colors is basically this section here, if we want to see those colors or not. I would recommend leaving them because they are very useful once you learn how to distinguish them. Entire leg row is basically the color of the aircraft on the whole row of the flight details. Aircraft colors, so if we want to display those colors, which is also very useful because you can distinguish the different registration numbers. And dim ferry flights, which basically means that ferry flights, so flights with no passengers, are of a lighter color than flights with passengers. Okay, so that's the colors. Warnings, cautions and notices, these are many various things that can be displayed in the schedule if you need them. So warnings are marked by a red background, cautions are marked by a yellow background, and notices are marked by white. So if we were to enable any of the warnings, we can go through the list and see which ones we want to use in our operation. These are the things that need the most attention. So basically things that are necessary to be dealt with before the flight can take place. So definitely things like FTL violations or aircraft discontinuity. Pretty much we can have all of them and see what happens. So now we can see there are some warnings on these particular items, and if we want to see what kind of warnings these are, we can simply hover the mouse over and the tooltip will give us an information. So in here we can see we have aircraft airport discontinuity, which basically means the last time this aircraft was in operation they landed at London Heathrow, and then this aircraft is taking off at Stansted, which gives us a discontinuity. There's no reposition in between them. So to the system, it looks like the aircraft magically appeared at Stansted. So that's quite an important piece of information and we want to be aware of that. In case of the aircraft, we can see the cockpit crew. There's not enough cockpit crew for the flight to be taking place. Right now we don't see any crew in here. Let's see if that's the reason. Yes, cockpit. We haven't had the cockpit selected. Apply. Okay, now we have the crew, but there's not enough crew for the flight to take place. The minimum numbers of crew required for the flight to take place is set up in the fleet settings. So for this aircraft it's 2 cockpit crew members, and obviously here's only 1, so that's why the aircraft gives us a warning. In terms of the crew members, we have airport recency expired and online familiarization expired. At the top here we also have the breakdown of the currency and endorsements. If that says expired, obviously we don't have many flights, so if we follow any currency we'll have the breakdown down here as well. So these are the warnings. If we go and have some cautions as well, let's have all of them. Apply. Do we have anything in yellow? Yes. So cautions are things that have to be attended to, but they're not as crucial as the warnings. So that would be things like the passenger's name's missing, so we have to fill in the passenger's data, or things like an open hill restriction, so a minor issue with the aircraft itself. So something that we have to be aware of, but it's not preventing us from having that flight. Okay, and the last one, notices in white. Let's select all, apply. Yes, we have some airports in the white background. Notices are basically additional information, and that includes things like airport briefing or additional notes and things like that. So if we hover the mouse, it will give us the information. There are some notes on this particular airport. The notes and different kinds of information on the airports can be found and added in the airport directory. So if I go to Stansted, I can go to notes and add additional notes in here, and they will be displayed as notices. Bear in mind the details that we gather about all of the airports in our database come from AcuQuick. It is a worldwide base and the data in the system is updated very often. You can also add your additional providers for all the airports. So even though we have the list already here, we can add new, provide the mandatory information like name and email, click save or update, and we can have additional providers, and that's in regards to handling fuel, hotels, supplies and so on. We also can set up a airport category for this particular airport for different aircraft types that we have in our fleet, add a airport briefing if necessary, or have the look at the map where the airport actually is. Okay, so that's the airport directory. The other things in the display options is preferred airport code. So The blue one is actually the active one, so if we want to change it to ICAO, simply change the code, and the same goes for the time zone. We can have that in UTC or local time. Now maybe let's move to the right panel. So once we have a list of activities added, we can start preparing the flights. So in here we have the checklist, flight, trip, crew, packs, fuel, and so on. The checklist is the ops center where we set up a to-do list and mark it off when certain items or certain parts of the preparation are done. In here I have a very short example. You can also see in the checklist columns there are different colors. So the green one means the checklist is fully prepared, everything's done, everything's correct. The yellow one means there's still something missing. We've still got at least one yellow item which is basically requested, and if it's red that means we still have to work on that. It's either none of the items are prepared or there's still some missing. Some of them are red. All items will have the status untouched by default if we haven't started working on the checklist yet. So we have a basic checklist in here. We can always add the items. We have quite an extensive range of items that can be added. So if we want to add any item, simply select it. If we want to add any notes, and that applies to every single item, we can add the items here. We can also upload files, and to remove an item we have this little bin icon here, and that's simply a history of the item. So if I were to change the status to requested, let's say I save, and then the status is changed to acknowledge, and I will add a note and save, you can then go to the history and see who's made what changes at which point in time. Okay, so that's quite a useful tool. The important thing to mention with the checklist is that all the items, apart from the handling and the slots, are modified manually. So you actually have to go in, make sure a certain item is dealt with or is in the process of dealing with, and then we mark it when it's done. In terms of the handling, this is actually a mechanism that allows us to send handling requests to different handlers. So let's have a look at an empty flight maybe. Okay, so we have an untouched checklist. In order to send a handling request, we have to select a handler from the list. In here we have a favorite handler that's been added manually, but we can also always remove it and just select a handler from the list. As I said, the list comes from the airport directory. Okay, and for the destination, then we need to save, and now we are able to send a new request. Right now we are in the test mode, so anything that we send from the system will come to our own email address instead of going to an actual handler, which means we can actually test the functionality and get to know it before we actually start using it. The test mode can be turned off by admins in the general settings. Parts like from, to, and all the emails can be set up in the system so that's predefined and we don't have to enter it every single time. The part in the actual form is taken from the schedule, so from the plan. We can see status new request. In here it is editable, so we can make changes as we wish in the actual form. However, we can also predefine it in the settings, but that's also for admins to do. The billing info, please arrange, and the footer can be predefined by the administrators. We can also upload some files and attach documents like GenDeck and the PAX manifest from this flight. Okay, once we are happy with the handling request, we simply click send. we have the message that the handling request has been sent. In this case, it will come to our internal email because we have the test mode, but normally that would be sent to an actual handler. And we can see that the status has changed to requested automatically, and the new request has changed to show history. Okay, the slot status has changed to requested as well. And here is an important part. That does not mean that Leon has requested a slot for you. That means if the handling request is sent out, the system assumes we also have requested the slot. So this is why the status changes automatically. Okay, but let's go back to the handling. Let's say we have sent the handling request, but something happens to the flight. So we have any changes done on the flight. For example, let's say we have some passengers flying with us as well. Okay, save. And now if we go back to the checklist and go back to the handling, now we can see the status changed to a question mark and it says update instead of show history. That means the system allows us to send an update to the handler. So we click update, we see the status changed to update, and all the changes that we made in the schedule are marked in red. Okay, if we're happy, we can send an update. The status changed to requested again. Now if we see the show history, it will give us a history of this particular handling request. So that was a new request, that was an update. Now, in the unlikely event, if we happen to change the handler, for example, if I go and change the handler, the status changes to the question mark and we go back to new request again. However, this time we can send a cancellation to the previous handler and a new request to the new handler. Obviously, you don't have to do it if you don't wish to send the cancellation. You can just unmark it in this checkbox. But let's say we send the cancellation to the previous handler and the new request to the new handler. Yeah, so simply click send, new and cancellation. And there we go, back to requested, show history, and we have new request that we then updated, then cancelled and sent a new request to the new handler. So that's how it works. And once the handling is finally confirmed, we just simply change the status to confirmed, and that has to be done manually. Okay, so these are the most important bits about the checklist. Obviously we have a sales checklist as well, but we're focusing on the ops one today. So that's the checklist. We can move on to the flight. Flight is basically the flight details, things like date, flight number, aircraft, and so on. We can add alternative airports. If necessary, Leon can also calculate the distance. The ICAO type is set by default in the fleet settings, so for each aircraft individually. So that's scheduled, non-scheduled, general, other or military. Same goes for the rule. We can select a default rule for each particular aircraft in the fleet settings. And then obviously if necessary that can be changed here as well. The rest facility, if we use them, that can be set up automatically as well in the fleet settings, but we're not using any at the moment. The rotation, again, fleet settings, that's mainly useful for the timeline view, which we'll go through in a second, and the AOC. If we have more than one AOC, which is possible to have different AOC for a different aircraft, we can select one for that particular flight in here as well. And we can tag the flight if we wish to. Tagging is basically an option that allows us to kind of filter the flights by different factors that are already available in the system. So in the tab more, we have things like flight number, trip number, airport, client, crew member, and we have tags as well. If we want to flag this flight by any other factor that is already available, all we need to do is simply click on the field, add tag, enter whatever we need to press enter, and the tag is added. Okay, so we can change the color, simply click on it, change the color, save. And now this particular flight is tagged by this particular tag. We can add as many tags as necessary, and they can be absolutely anything you want. Alright, so let's have that. And if I click save now, we'll have the tags in here. And now if we go to the tab more and filter flights by the tags, we will see only the ones that have those tags assigned. Okay, reset. So if we want to go back to default settings, the button reset will help us get there. Okay, these are some ops notes, sales notes, which also have a history option that we can check on here, just like the checklist does. Okay, the trip tab is mainly used for sales purposes, where we have the trip number, which is automatically generated by the system, but you can change it manually if you wish to. The status of the flight, so as I said, the confirmed, option and opportunity, and the type of flight. The type of flight is usually by default PAX, but that can be changed in general settings as well. Also by default, each flight newly added is marked as commercial, but if we untick that box, that will be non-commercial as well. A quotation number, we can create a quotation that will simply indicate the quotation is made on this flight. So we can either leave that number blank and that will generate the number automatically, or we can just simply add the quotation number, the price and the currency, and that's just as simple as that. We can add a client if we wish to. The clients need to be set up in the phone book by the administrators, so basically we have all their data, the contact data, the address, the representatives and so on. Takeoff and landing emails allows us to send movement messages. Move leg into another trip is a simple tool that allows us to move this particular leg to another trip. So we can either create a new trip, or if we start entering a different trip number, for example, if we move it to this trip, it will be added to this particular one with this particular number. Okay, but let's leave it for now. Tagging again, the notes, these can be also set up by default in the general settings by the administrators, or they can be just added as a regular text, and you can upload some files that will be available in this tab for other people who use it as well. Click save. So now we can see in the quotation column that the quotation has been added. Crew, this is the place where we add and monitor the crew members' details. So here we have the list of default positions that we set for this particular aircraft type, but if there are some that are missing, we can always go and add position here as well. To add the crew member, simply click on the list. You will have a list of available crew members, which means these are the crew members that have the particular rating, in this case that's flight attendant. The fact that these are all grey means they are out of the airport that we are adding this crew member on. So let's see if we have any available. No one in these particular ratings. Let's see if we have a different captain maybe. No, everyone's grey. Okay, we can reposition them later, that's no problem. If there's something wrong with the crew member, Leon will give you a warning. So in this case, this currency is not right, so there hasn't been 3 takeoffs and landing in the past 90 days for this particular crew member, and they have the airport recency and familiarization not issued as well for London Heathrow. That's something crew planners we'll have to attend to be able to add them on a flight, or we can simply save ignoring warnings if we feel like it's not as necessary at this point in time. In order to edit the information about this crew member, we can go to the profile from here, and these are where all the information are kept. So let's add maybe a new crew member. So the mandatory fields are marked with the star, so things like name, surname, code, obviously, because all the crew members need to have their codes. This is how they are distinguished in the flight list. Home base, things like passports. You can add as many passports as necessary and mark here which one is the default one for each flight. Okay, and the ratings here as well. By ratings we mean functions on a flight. So we are adding a person for the first officer position, so this is added by default, but you can also add maybe the same rating for a different type if necessary. If you wish to add further details for this particular crew member, you can open the full edit and we'll have some additional fields here as well. But maybe let's go back, and let's go back to the crew tab. Okay, we haven't saved the changes, so that's back to how it was before, and we can see we have the both of the crew members marked in green, which means they are both selected. And if we want to select one only, simply click on that code and we'll have the list of available options at the bottom. FTL Calculations give us a breakdown of the calculations set in the system for your company. Basically, once you provide us with your Chapter 7 of the operations manual, we set it up in the system, and the system calculates the duty and FTP times automatically for each particular crew member on each flight. At the top here we have the FTP period, which can be edited manually, so we can change the reporting times. If we, let's say, have the reporting time 10 minutes later, we can change that to manually. A goes for automatic and M goes for manual, and we can do the same for the report off time. We'll also have additional options under those icons here, so things like joining legs, disconnecting legs, adding brakes if it's possible, and stuff like this. So these will be available under this little icon here. Okay, and at the bottom here we can see the rules and regulations. We can see the limits that are set up in the system and the actual times, and if that's good or bad. So if there's a violation, there would be a red cross in here. So if you wish to see further details about the regulations, you can hover the mouse over and that will give you the explanation in this little tooltip. You can also view FTL sheet for this particular person with a further breakdown of the duty times. At the moment we only have one flight in this whole month, but you can see clearly it gives you the breakdown, the type of duty, the times, the rest, FDP times, cumulative duty times, block times, and so on and so forth. And that's available for a single person only for a selected period of time. Okay, which is also accessible from reports, crew, FTL sheet. Okay, but let's go back to the crew tab. So we have our crew member, we have the FTL calculations. The dot is green, which means everything's fine. We don't need to check it further if we don't wish to. Passports. So if we have a passport for this particular crew member inserted into the system and it's not expired and everything's okay with it, then that will be green as well. Endorsements, which means different types of documents that we have assigned for this particular person. In this case, this is red, which means there's something wrong and we can check it and amend it if necessary. So we have some documents like medical, a license and a visa. If the date is red, that means that's expired. If it's yellow, that means it's about to expire, and a regular black means it's okay. The endorsements are also divided into two sections: required for dispatch and other. So required for dispatch means the documents that are necessary for the takeoff, and if any of those is red, the system will give you a red dot here. And the currency, obviously, if it's expired as well, that means there are no flights inserted for this particular crew member in the last 90 days with 3 takeoffs and 3 landings. So in this case, we can add the past flights in the last 90 days, or we can wait for the 90 days to pass, and then that will clear itself out. The dot next to the name is a summary of the dots down here. So if any of those dots will be red, that one will be red as well. If all of them were green, that one would be green as well. If we wish to copy the same crew to different parts of the same trip, so to different legs, we can use the copy crew option. That gives us the information you can copy crew only when the bottom trip panel is open, which means the edit trip panel down here. So if we copy the crew, that gives us the other leg available for the crew to be copied to, and we simply click copy and click save. Yes, save ignoring warnings. And that will give us the same crew member on the other leg of the same trip.